Welcome to today's episode of The Growth Zone. I am Christian Bartsch. What is the core benefit of listening to this show? Business leaders in corporate and privately held companies gain insights into trends and strategies that provide them with a competitive advantage in the marketplace. Each episode focuses on an area such as marketing, sales, innovation, or funding that is absolutely critical to the growth of companies, whether they are startups or corporate global players, where management needs to juggle the challenges of market entry or knowing how to navigate the uncertainties of disruptive developments. Mind feeding is where clarity evolves and helps solving organizational challenges. For those who listen to the entire episode, I have a special surprise gift. I am working on some great guests that are industry leaders in management, innovation, and marketing. Let's get started on today's episode. So today I'm with Matt Johnson, and our topic is how to convert attention into sales and impact. We must become MicroFamous. So, who is Matt? Matt talks about the path to sustainable, scalable success, starting with becoming micro-famous. Famously influential to the right people. He counters the myth that we need to build a big audience in order to get the business we want, and teaches people how to win online with their own micro-famous strategy and without being glued to their phones. Here a quote of him. So, to convert attention into sales and impact, we must become micro-famous. Matt Johnson is a marketing agency founder, podcaster, and musician. Matt runs a podcast launch and production agency based in San Diego, an international team that helps business coaches, consultants, and thought leaders use done-for-you podcasting to attract an audience, build influence, and become micro-famous. So let's go and listen in. So today I'm with Matt Johnson, who is based in San Diego, in a beautiful location with great beaches and wonderful weather, depending on where you are and when you are. Nevertheless, Matt, can you please tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Sure. So I'm an agency owner. We launch and produce podcasts for emerging thought leaders, so mostly coaches, consultants, and business speaker author types. And essentially, the agency that I run, we've got people all over the world, specialists in each of their areas. And so it's a fully remote team. We've been working remotely since day one, so very familiar with that. So we didn't take much of a hit, actually, during the COVID situation, which is really great. And but 5 years ago, I was just some guy working at a marketing agency and got the opportunity to get into business development by doing Google Hangouts with some of the influential relationships that the agency had. And one day, one of those influencers called me up and just basically pitched me on the idea of starting a podcast together. And the timing was fantastic because I was about a week away from calling him up and pitching him the exact same thing. So he came up with the idea at the same time. And today he's one of my best friends. We still run that podcast. It's in the real estate space and has 1.5 million downloads. Got a bunch of accolades and made a bunch of, top 15, top 20 lists in the space. And I ended up being like a contributor to the industry, news website that's the biggest one in the space. And it essentially made us, I would say it took me from being just a guy that worked inside of an agency to being an influencer and a speaker in that world in under 2 years. And so I ended up getting into the coaching consulting side, but got pulled into producing more podcasts because it was the most effective thing I could do to put a coaching or consulting business on the map and attract ideal clients. So I came to it from kind of that space. but essentially just by demand. People saw what I was doing. They saw the content that I was putting out and how I was doing, 5, 6, 7 hours of live video podcasting a week, and just wondering how I was cranking out that much content. So I'd tell them a little bit about the team that I'd built behind the scenes that was doing all the behind the scenes stuff. And they said, well, can I rent your team basically when they're not working for you? And so I said yes to that, and that worked for a while until we had so many people that broke, and then I had to fix that, and then I had to turn it into an agency, and then eventually I got out of all the 3 other businesses that I was in at the time and just went all in. And so that's what we do now. We sell one thing to one type of person, which has made it simple enough that now I run my agency in 3 to 4 hours a week, and everything else is optional.
Wow, that sounds really great. So you're doing as well a lot of video content whilst you're actually doing the audio as well. So that's a good double value that you're generating with one.
Yeah, well, and you know this, when somebody hires a coach, especially if they're going to work remotely with you, they want to get a sense of who you are, whether you get along, whether they resonate with your personality. And video is by far a lot better at communicating a huge amount of intangible information all at once. And it's also really great for building the relationships with the people that you have on the podcast with you. So I really enjoy doing video podcasts because you get a better sense of who the person is on the other end of the line. And then, when you put that content out to the public and it's in video as well as audio, they get to know you and build trust with you a lot faster. And that translates into people signing up faster.
Cool. And where can I see then the video version of the podcast?
So we do clips that go out on LinkedIn mainly. So that's where we use our video for our podcast. For my real estate show, we actually started off by broadcasting live to YouTube. So we have full episodes there. And that worked really well in some sectors. It doesn't work well in every sector. So it depends on who your audience is, whether you put the full episodes on YouTube. And in some cases, I recommend that you do clips instead for social media rather than putting the entire episode out.
Mm-hmm. That's good. So as well reduces the need to audit or let's say edit all sorts of sections where something maybe is not quite right or something looks awkward or whatever. The odd finger in the wrong place or whatever. That can always happen on video, which is an advantage of being just audio. You can be dressed as you fancy. For certain shows, you have to be dressed up properly. On other shows, you can just be as you are, totally casual. That fits as well, depending on the heat and the temperature or whatever.
Yeah, it's funny because I showed up for this and I'm just always prepared for video just in case. But I realized that we were on audio only. But I've got my whole setup here. I've got my HD camera and I'm wearing a dress shirt. And then I realized, we're not recording video. It's okay, well, no big deal.
Exactly. Great. So today's topic is to convert attention into sales and impact, we must become microfamous. So what does that mean?
Well, so in brief, we have a situation right now where people are creating a lot of content. We've been hammering it into people that they need to create content. We've got the Gary Vaynerchuks of the world constantly telling us we should be online multiple hours a day creating content, that the answer is always more content. If you don't have the sales that you want, create more content. And unfortunately, people are taking that advice and it's simply not working. And I think there's a gap there, right? So there's a missing link, in other words, between creating content that gets attention and converting that attention into sales. And people are a little bit lost. There was not too long ago, just a few weeks ago, I came across a video from Gary Vaynerchuk where one of his own listeners and fans sent him a video message essentially asking him that same question. Hey, I'm generating all this content. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. I'm taking all the advice and it's just not translating into sales. And I think there's a couple of different ways to try to fill that gap. And if you're really confident in your sales skills, you'll turn to that, right? Well, let's get more people on the phone. If you're really confident in your speaking skills, or if you're really good at, going out and doing a speaking engagement and signing up clients afterwards from the audience, you'll go do more of that. If you're really confident in your networking skills, you'll go do more of that. Well, the unfortunate thing, especially now this year, is a lot of those things just aren't an option. Live events are not an option. Networking events are mostly not an option in most places, certainly not here in most states here in the States. And so there's just not as much there that you can use to close that gap between attention and sales. And so people are finding themselves between a rock and a hard place. So here's where the micro-famous part comes in, because if you think about somebody like a Tony Robbins, and if you got the opportunity to do a coaching call with Tony Robbins, the money is almost secondary, right? The only question is, can I afford it? The question isn't, do I want to do it? The question isn't, would it be helpful? It'd be life-changing. It's worth it. The question is just, can you afford him? And because he's already built that level of influence, right? He has such a level of real enduring influence in the personal development space that the question is not whether you would want to do it and whether it would be impactful. The question is just, can you afford it? And is this the right timing for it? And that's the place where you want to get to in your own business and in your own industry, to where you have such a level of influence in the space that the question is not whether it be valuable to work with you. The question is not, do they even want to work with you? They already know those things. The question is just, is the timing right and can they afford you? And that's the level that you can reach if you become micro-famous in your space. So that's my point of view on that, is that rather than trying to fill that gap by speaking more, using our sales skills on the phone, using our networking skills in person, let's fill that gap by building real enduring influence in our industry.
Yeah, and then that actually then, of course, converts when you see it as well. Not only that you're getting clients, you're getting the ability to charge more than maybe some others. Yeah, because I see it as well in some spaces where we've done as well things. We have some in certain areas competitors where they maybe charge, let's say, $80, and we charge $400 to $600 per hour just for that special kind of service. And that's a big difference, of course. You have to do something for it to be there. But when you look at it, what's currently happening, what would you advise for people to really do, or how to have a strategic plan to get things properly done?
In terms of becoming micro-famous, I think the first step is always to get out there and do exactly what we're doing. So get featured on podcasts as an expert thought leader, as an expert guest. Get into situations where you can start to share your bold opinions and the things that you believe about the world, about your business, about your industry that make you unique, so that you give people a different point of view. So I think we were talking about this before we hit record, like when you have clients or customers who come to you for a solution and they end up signing up, but they don't believe the right things, they don't agree with you on the way you look at the world and what you believe is important, they'll sign up, but then they don't end up getting results. And that does you no good, right? You don't get referrals out of that. You don't get repeat business out of that. You don't get testimonials out of that. You essentially get churn and burn clients, which is not a fun position to be in. Well, how do you avoid that churn and burn situation? Well, it starts on the front end with taking on the right clients, right? So rather than taking on just anyone who will sign up and cut the check, you start limiting yourself to only taking on the people that you really believe you can get results for, people that are closer to your ideal. And when you work with those folks, they get results, which means then you do get more repeat business and you do get more referrals and you do get more testimonials. And just a quick word on kind of focusing on your space and testimonials. I learned this in real life because I was very, very narrowly focused when I first started out, and we've expanded a little bit beyond that, but I still get a lot of the same thing happening, which is when people look at my website, typically my prospects, my ideal prospects, they'll look at my website and they'll look at the other podcasts that we've launched in the past, and they'll go, oh, I know that person, and I know that person, and I know that person. Like, oh man, I didn't realize they work with all these people. And if that's not happening to you, you may be too broad in your marketing message. You may be attracting people from too many different niches, right? Because if they're coming to your website and they don't know any of the other people that you've worked with, you get no real credibility. And so if you're really operating in a nice, narrowly focused niche, when people find out who else you've worked with, that should raise your level of credibility. And that's what happened to me. And so I got to see that in real life, what happens when you work and you operate in a really nice, narrowly focused niche. You get that virtuous cycle of people coming to you and saying, oh, I know the other people that you've worked with. That destroys all questions of credibility. I'm going to go ahead and sign up. And then that also generates you repeat business and referrals into other people that are similar to them. And you end up dominating a niche. So that's kind of what MicroFamous is about, is getting to that point where, you don't have to be everywhere all at once. You don't have to be everything to everyone. You can serve a lot of different types of people later, but it's a lot easier and more effective to start out by serving a very narrow, focused audience right away, because then you get those virtuous effects that I was talking about.
Yes, and that's the key thing, as you said. It's focusing, being narrow focused, and as well not trying to do everything, like selling, let's say, potatoes, and at the same time you're selling game stations, and at the same time you as well selling, let's say, guns, or you're selling anything like cars or anything. And I think, how can you sell in your dealership potatoes and cars and other stuff? And so that doesn't really fit. Do you know at all how the car works? Can you service my car properly? All these crazy questions come, of course, in the head. It's different, of course, if, let's say, you are selling trucks and you're selling at the same time machines to let's say, that you need for the harvesting. For instance, then a farmer would say, okay, I can get everything from you that I need and it's fit. But if you're selling trucks to everybody and it's all sorts of stuff and there's no really quality, then I notice if I have a question, my produce goes bad on transport because maybe it's got the wrong refrigerator, I've got the wrong temperature, the stuff doesn't work, and so on. It has to be
it's really
narrowly
true.
fixed.
Yeah, and it's and you hit the nail on the head. So it affects everything, right? So that avoiding that level of focus has all kinds of side effects. And you mentioned the quality part. That's one piece of it, right? If you don't if you don't focus enough to see the same things over and over again because you're working with the same types of people, you never really develop real expertise in your space. So you mentioned just from a manufacturing perspective, yeah, you'll end up manufacturing things that they don't work as well as they could because you don't spend enough time in any one thing to really hone in on it. And the same thing is true if you're selling consulting, right? If you're consulting with a particular type of company, you're going to get better because you see that same type of company over and over and over again, and you're going to develop much deeper and more accurate expertise in how to help that specific kind of company than someone that comes in that consults with all different types of companies. And because the more you see the same pattern over and over again, the more you start to recognize the differences in the patterns, and you develop real deep, narrow expertise. And so, yeah, it hits from a marketing perspective. It hits from a quality of service perspective. I think we've radically underestimated just how fragmented the world has become and how specialized and customized people expect things to be for them. I run into this a lot in the coaching consulting world, where people assume that because they've got really good expertise in one type of business, that they can go and then sell that expertise into a bunch of different types of businesses. And while that may be true, they don't recognize that when they go into another industry space, they're competing against people that are specializing in nothing but that space. So all of a sudden, they're now the generalist competing against people who are more specialized than they are. And there's a specific strategy when that works, but most of the time it doesn't. Right? The specialist typically will beat the generalist. Right? If you want an electric car and you have a certain price range, guess what? You're probably going for a Tesla. You're not going to one of the other companies that just an electric car is one of the 15 different types of cars that they make. You're going to go to the brand that's known for building electric cars. They are the specialist in that space. And that's what people want. The more selection and choice people have, they tend to choose the thing that's specialized for them. And I think it's just people are really taking a while to catch up to that phenomenon.
Yeah, and you see it even as the example with the trucks as well. Just look at companies like Nikola and so on. They're so specialized. And for instance, the owner originally comes from, or one of his main hobbies is flying. So of course he has a different kind of approach to vehicles, and somebody just produces trucks over the last 100 years and hasn't restarted thinking about things, just starting from scratch and thinking, okay, maybe I can do this different. That you see as well in other, even car manufacturers. When you look at the traditional ones, electric cars, they all just look as if they tried to somehow stick some Airfix car together, and it doesn't really, it looks hideous. And you'd say, well, I can't really park in front of somebody else's house with that and feel comfortable with it. Unless, of course, he is an environmentalist and absolutely funny. And he says, okay, great, well. But otherwise, it just, some of these cars really look hideous. And and the same thing today, for instance, we were driving back from the ice pileup, and you notice two types of cars in the street at the moment. You either notice the Porsches or the Teslas. That's it.
Yeah.
And I live here in an area where you have Porsches, you've got Jaguars, you'll have some Bentleys. We even have some Maseratis here around and that. But otherwise, it's unusual. You can now even go in the evenings along some side streets, and you'll find like 3 Teslas parked behind each other, and think
Yeah.
this wasn't 3, 4 years ago.
No, and I think there's such a perfect example of how to break into a new market. Tesla didn't come out with 5 different cars. They didn't come out with 5 different models. And I think if they would have had a much harder time breaking into the market. They launched with one type of car, and they went luxury first. And so I mentioned that in the book, just to go after the most valuable slice of the market. Tesla is going into a market of electric cars where the most popular vehicle is the Prius, which was a mid to low market mass consumer. A very, very wide range of people can buy a Prius. They did the exact opposite, right? They didn't build a competitor to the Prius. They went super high end part of the market. They went after the most valuable slice of the market first, and now they're working their way down into the mid part of the market, which I think is exactly the right strategy. And unfortunately, a lot of us come out and we try to break into the market with 5 different services. Whether you're in coaching, consulting, whether you're an entrepreneur with a medium-sized business, the temptation is to try to serve everybody in your space and give them anything that they could conceivably write you a check for. And so what you end up with is like this mishmash of different services and different programs and different options. And the problem is, it sounds like that'd be better because it gives people options. The problem is people don't buy options. You ever heard that quote that the confused mind doesn't buy? I think we confuse people a lot, way more than we think we do. And so like me coming from the background of working for a company that only sold one thing to one type of person, I got away from that for a while. And then I basically shook myself and slapped myself in the face and got back to it. And that's been the key to running a business that isn't just profitable, but it's also simple, and it's systematic, and it's rewarding, and it doesn't suck up my entire life. If we ran 5 different programs for our clients, where we'd have way more quality issues, we'd have a lot more customer service that needs to be done. Whereas because we do one thing for one type of person, right now it's very systematic, and we have very few quality issues, and we have very few customer service issues, and I don't run around putting out fires with my staff and my team. And so there's a lot of benefits to that, of just doing one thing for one type of person. And Tesla is such a great example. Before you expand, figure out what that one thing is, figure out that one type of person that you want to serve, that's your bread and butter ideal client, and just build them exactly what they need. And the discipline in the early days is just to stay disciplined enough to say no to the people that don't fit at first. You can serve them later. It's not like you can leave them behind forever, but at least to start out with. And when you're on that journey to becoming micro-famous in your space, the more you focus and the more you say no to the people that aren't a good fit, the more you can focus on the people who are the best fit. And it basically just follows that Tesla strategy.
Yeah, and that is definitely a good way to do it. As we're speaking about all different kinds of strategies and things that you, as you said, you could focus on and so on, how do people get micro-focus or micro-famous? You said content. Yeah, we hear a lot of that, as you said, as well with Gary Vee.
Yeah, there's a lot of advice out there, and I think there's so much tactical advice floating around that people don't really know where to start, which is part of why I wrote the book, because I wanted to give people a framework for like, how does all this stuff fit together? Because I don't know about you, but there's a lot of people in my space that wake up every day and the question on their mind is, what can I post today that's going to get me attention and get me clients? And to me, that's just the wrong question to be asking. It's not a fun way to live. I don't want to be on social media all the time. Most of my clients don't want to be on social media all the time. And so I think the better way to do it, and I lay out this approach in the book. So it's start by getting featured on podcasts. Then when the time is right, launch your own podcast, which is kind of your own platform for thought leadership, and run those things together, right? So that's where you create the bulk of your content. You just show up and hit record and talk. It's the easiest thing for anybody that enjoys talking about your business, your space, your industry. Like, that's the easiest thing to do, is just show up on a microphone and talk about the stuff that you're passionate about. So to me, that should be the bulk of what you do. Then have somebody else pull chunks out of that audio or video and post it to social media for you, right? And then you just engage and talk to people and have conversations around the content that you're creating. So for most people, that is a much easier way to create content. It ends up creating better, higher quality content. And the end product of that is that instead of waking up every day and wondering what you're going to post on social media, you already have things that are going out based on interviews and based on podcast episodes you've recorded, 2 or 3 weeks ago. So you don't have to ask yourself those questions anymore. Now it's just, I'm going to wake up today and I'm going to have conversations with people about content I've already created and scheduled. So it changes that whole game. And then the content that you're creating not only is attracting attention, but when you're doing it right, it's attracting ideal clients. So then you're having more conversations with the right people. And those are a lot more fun to have. Showing up to a sales call with someone who is a bread and butter client, that's a lot more fun to have that call than to have a call with somebody that is not going to be ideal for you. So I wanted to give people a framework for how to think about creating content that attracts people, because there's a whole universe of things that you can do, but there's a way to do it that is simple, that takes most of the mental burden off of you, and it completely eliminates that question of what do I post today. And that's basically the middle portion of the book, is how to build that sort of system.
Yeah, definitely, because that's so important to schedule stuff and not be like always just every day thinking up what to do. We do the same thing. We schedule as well. We have pre-record all the different episodes, and then eventually we broadcast them. We now and then, of course, put an episode inside that maybe is important because of some current issue for whatever reason, but usually everything as well scheduled, pre-content stuff and so on. And it takes a time. Sometimes you need a day where you have good ideas and that, and you can create good content. And other times it doesn't work. And the same thing, it doesn't matter whether it's podcasts, public release, press releases and other stuff. Yeah.
But it does get easier over time. I will say that, getting interviewed, at first might feel awkward, but that gets easier. Interviewing other people, on your own podcast, that gets easier. Everything gets easier over time. It's just like anything else. If you hit the gym, you do the reps and you get stronger. It's the same way with podcasting or really any other form of content marketing. The more you do it, the easier it gets, the faster it gets, and the better you get at doing it. But yeah, I think that especially in like the small to medium sized kind of business world, that there's been the mentality that, like, let's just generate the highest number of leads possible, and then let's get the people on the phone, and then just wash, rinse, and repeat. And what you end up doing is you either burn through yourself as a salesperson, or you end up burning through salespeople, right? Because 90 out of every 100 people they talk to aren't a good fit. And I think we're seeing an interesting shift in the world where that's getting less popular, and people don't want to jump on the phone with a sales rep as much anymore. They're doing way more research before they ever jump on to the phone with a salesperson. I think the last study that came out, and this is a few years old at this point, but I'm sure you came across that study from Harvard a few years ago that said that I think B2B buyers are doing something like 60% of their research, and they're like 60% into their buying journey before they ever get on the phone with somebody. So that's a massive shift, right? 60% down the funnel before they ever jump on the phone with somebody. So if you're not putting the content out that they want to consume, they're going to go to someone that does, right? If they want to consume content, they want to read and they want to watch videos and they want to listen to podcasts before they jump on the phone with the salesperson, and you're not creating that content and your competitors are, you're going to lose everyone who wants to do all that homework first before they jump on the phone with somebody, because they're going to go to the competitor that's giving them the content first. And as everyone gets into the game and everybody's giving content, then the game shifts again to where now it's about who's producing the best content, right? Who's producing content that's actually genuinely helpful, right? So it raises the bar again. And so that's kind of the journey that everybody's been on. First, it was like nobody was creating any content online. Then some people started to do it and they started to win. And now we're seeing more and more people jump into that game. And now it's forcing everyone to raise their game basically and create more useful, more helpful content. Because people want the bottom line is that's just what people want. They want to get to know you first. They want to get to know your company first before they're going to jump on a sales call. So if you have a website that basically is a brochure and a button to schedule a call, you're probably losing out to competitors that have more content for people to consume. So that's just the reality of the world that we live in. And that shift has just taken place in the last 10 years.
Yeah, and that's the thing, because many people over the last few years always said, yeah, websites don't convert anymore, so you need to have a landing page and blah, blah, blah. And they're actually not aware that actually the trends are changing. And this as well difference between B2C clients, B2B, or B2 government, or B2E, B2 employees, industry, and different other areas. So certain things you can use, certain things are not applicable.
Yeah, I think when someone says like your website doesn't convert or websites don't convert anymore, yeah, to me it's because websites aren't magic. They never have been. But if you're in an industry where nobody has a website and you're the first one to put one up, then that gives you an advantage. But then that advantage fades away as everyone else gets a website too. So then now what matters is the words and the idea that you're communicating. I talk in the book about what is a clear and compelling idea. Because if your website's not converting, it's probably not the fact that it's not designed properly. Although you may be making some mistakes there, but odds are it's not the design of the website; it's the idea that you're communicating on your website. Like there's a really great example from some of my favorite books. Going back to like FedEx when they first took off in the '70s. Their commercial that it absolutely positively had to be there overnight. They picked one service, which was overnight package delivery, small package delivery. Out of all the things that they offer, they picked that one thing. And they said, we're going to go to the market and we're going to hammer that over and over and over and over and over again. Well, that idea of the absolutely positively had to be there overnight, that idea captured people's attention and imagination, and it made them want to try the service. And then they found out, oh, FedEx does all this other stuff. Well, okay, I'm already using them for overnight delivery. Let's use them for these other things. But they basically sacrificed talking about all that other stuff, and they talked about one thing, which is overnight delivery. Well, the company growth exploded. Right now, they've gotten away from that. Guess what? Growth slows, right? So they keep learning. We don't learn the same lesson, and we don't keep doing what works. But what works is focusing on one clear and compelling idea that captures people's attention and gets them to give us a try. Then once they get into our world, they can find out maybe we offer other things, other products, other programs, other services. But yeah, if we start with one thing, one very, very clear and compelling idea, well, then I think our website can convert. Our advertising and our marketing and our content can convert. But when we try to talk about too many different things and we make our idea unclear and it loses its ability to be compelling, then that's when we get into trouble. And we have situations like that where our website just doesn't convert.
Yeah, and the same thing is for landing pages and all these different things. So, Matt, it was great having you here on the show. How can people reach out to you or find your book or other things?
Well, the book is on Amazon, so that's definitely, I know you've got a lot of international listeners, so that's the best way to get a hold of it. You can also just keep track of me at getmicrofamous.com. All the links out are there, including, so we're kind of building that new website there, but there's a link out, to the podcast and to the free digital version of the book and different things like that. So if you're like me and you want a physical print copy in your hands, that's always my favorite way to read a book. Definitely check that out on Amazon.
That's great. So it was awesome having you, and I'm sure we'll be talking in the future as well about other relevant topics that are helpful for our listeners.
Thanks. I hope so.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode of The Growth Zone with Christian Bartsch. Thank you for listening. Please leave a review or rating here on iTunes or on podchaser.com. If you found the content helpful, then share it on social media. I would like to invite you to follow our show so that you don't miss the upcoming interviews with leaders in the market. Simply visit the website follow.prmediareach.com. I will be adding the link also to the description of this episode so that you just need to click on that link. For those of you who are listening and signing up to follow the show, I have reserved a free copy of the Ultimate Guide on Content Marketing. This is the strategy that got me top corporate clients like McDonald's, Linde, Hewlett-Packard, Deutsche Bank, Volvo, and many others. That strategy has been working for over 10 years. It also got me contacts with police, transport authorities, military, and several universities, and even leading research institutes. For sure, it also worked wonders as it got me many small, medium-sized entrepreneurs and enterprises as clients. And that even included international clients from all around the world. The link to sign up for our free broadcasting service and the guide is follow.prmediareach.com. That will give you access to the most recent version of my ultimate guide on content marketing. You can follow me as well on Twitter by using the Twitter handle CAPBarge. That's spelled Charlie, Alpha, Papa, Bravo, Alpha, Romeo, Tango, Sierra, Charlie, Hotel. Yes, that is CAPBarge. Charlie, Alpha, Papa, Bravo, Alpha, Romeo, Tango, Sierra, Charlie, Hotel.